Hello, everyone. Welcome to Risen Esports Champions League. Once again, we are hot in the middle of playoffs here. I'm Paul. Please be joined by Beatdown Boulevard and Dylan Kleinven once again. The usual crew, the usual suspects. We're here to have a good time tonight, and we're here to bring you TBA versus Winthrop University. And we're going to dive first. Let's start at 40,000 foot. A foot view here, fellas. Let's talk about the bracket. What are we looking at? So, Mr. K-Ted, if you would be so kind to toss the bracket up on the screen. Tonight, we are operating out of the losers bracket here. So, as you can see, TBA and Winthrop, the winner will be moving on to play Zenith in that semifinal game, which I think we all anticipate is going to be an absolute banger given how great Zenith has been and how great these two teams are, which leads me to, really the question we've all got on our hands. I'm going to start with you, Beatdown. Let's turn, I guess, to Winthrop first. What does it mean for these teams, and what's it mean for Winthrop?
So the thing for Winthrop is that Collegiate is currently in the off season. So for them, what the whole point is that they're kind of testing things out a little bit. You saw last week, if you were watching, Sir Kenji has actually swapped to the jungle role currently for the team. They have Clyde on support, and because of how well it went, they're keeping it going. So their eyes are mostly towards the next collegiate season. They aren't as concerned with how they actually place here in champs. It's about what works for this roster going forward and whether or not they actually need to make changes to this roster going forward. If they happen to have a great match tonight, if they happen to smash TBA, for instance, I think it's fair to say this is the roster you'll see for the next season because TBA is an absolute powerhouse. So the fact that if that's in the cards for them, this roster is probably what we're going to see. But this is why you see things like Sir Kenji in the jungle. This is why you see things mixed up. We might see a little bit of unorthodox play for them, maybe, just to give you an idea of how, winning this match would be cool, but they're kind of looking ahead.
Yeah, and I think then to turn this to Mr. Dillon here, get you started with. So for TBA, I mean, they are a powerhouse of a team, like Beatdown said. But so for them, what does this ultimately mean? And especially as their players start to think about what their future might hold, what does it mean for their players?
Well, I think this is inarguably a more important match for TBA, right? Because these are all amateur players with a lot to prove. Young Mid is somebody who has, shocked the amateur scene over the last few months, ever since Scouting Grounds this year began. Cozy Shroud, much the same. Their jungler Goo, also a very high-ranked player. These are all players who are notorious in the amateur scene and who want to kind of make that next push towards, academy, towards, the very, very top of amateur. And for the side of Winthrop, I mean, you nailed it, Beatdown. These players are all playing on scholarship, and I don't really think a random match tonight is really going to determine their fate because they all have their secured spot on the Winthrop roster. Whereas TBA, you never know with these amateur rosters. One loss in a tournament like this where they're expected to go all the way, the roster might blow up. A couple players may move around, and you really need to see TBA perform well tonight if the players are they have a lot on their shoulder to prove.
The interesting thing, too, is that even if they do well, maybe the roster gets picked apart anyways. Because, of course, at this high level of amateur play, scouting comes into play, like you're talking about, Dylan. We're in the off season, both in collegiate and for pro play as a whole. So a lot of important people are looking to tournaments like these to see what the future of pro play looks like. So for the players of TBA, this is a really important match. This is kind of where they need to show up, especially because going into these playoffs, they did seed higher than Winthrop. So ideally, they should be able to beat a lower seed team as well.
Right, and that's the thing too. I mean, we're coming up on Scouting Grounds, not that far from here. I believe don't we have a player from Scouting Grounds here? Plux is going to be Scouting Grounds coming up.
Yep. It's tomorrow also, I think.
Holy cow. Yeah, so that's right. Yeah. I mean, we had Sir Kenji was, interestingly, we mentioned he's in the jungle. He was in the jungle in 2018 for Scouting Grounds. So we have one Scouting Ground former on Winthrop. We've got a Scouting Grounds current in Plux for TBA. And I think I sort of buried the lead here that this is a knockout game. So I really want to hover for a second on what Dylan mentioned, right? Because if they lose this game, and this is especially prevalent in games like Overwatch, but especially in League, where it's like, if TBA loses tonight, this might be the last time you see this TBA roster, sort of, in any form, right? I think that's a realistic thing. Like if this doesn't go right and like Plux gets, pardon the pun, plucked out and out of Scouting Grounds, this could be the last time we see this roster. And as great of a team as they are, ultimately where the players go is kind of anyone's guess.
Yeah, you're completely right. With these amateur rosters, especially with, a lot of the tournaments completing now, Risen's a couple weeks away from finishing, Upsurge is entering their playoffs as well. I mean, these tournaments are going to come to a conclusion within the next month or so, and then you're going to see, 2 or 3 months where these rosters really begin to shake up a lot. And especially, with the build up to SGC 2021, I'm sure that there's going to be more tournaments, there's going to be a lot of development there. These players are probably going to look to be on rosters, starting in January, February, March. And so their performance here, I mean, if you can say that you won the Risen 2020 split, which is one of the bigger tournaments right now in the fall season, that's a huge thing to say to these amateur orgs like, Supernova or Mirage or anything like that. It's a great thing to
Oh
have in
yeah.
your back pocket.
Yeah, I think that'd be absolutely massive. So that's kind of setting the stage for TBA. Now I want to touch on Winthrop again a little bit, and let's dive into some of the play styles that we've seen. And I know Beatdown, we had the chance pregame. We were talking a lot about the different play styles of these teams, and what do you expect from Winthrop tonight? Now we had a chance to speak with some of their administration, and they kind of talked about, hey, they're here to stay competitive, to have fun, and for this to be a bigger thing, as a team, not so much that, like we mentioned, TBA being scouted. So what do you think we might expect from Winthrop coming out tonight?
So the interesting thing is that we did talk about it, and it's that actually their play styles are quite similar. Both like to play through their mid and bot lane, and it's even worth noting too in terms of play style, they're very similar. They will pretty much fight just for the sake of it. There could be no objectives on the map, and they are definitely looking to risk it all for some pretty impactful leads here. And it's definitely a bit unlike other teams you see in these tournaments, like Maryville, for instance. But these teams, they like to scrap it out. And that's why this is actually going to be a pretty interesting matchup, because it's fun to see both teams who are willing to opt in for fights just for fight's sake. And personally, it's my preferred style to watch just from a pure enjoyment standpoint. And it's really interesting to see how teams can convert these things into victories, but also how it ends up being leading to a loss.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at these two rosters, you could argue that the only like selfless player that we should expect this game is the top for Winthrop,
Yeah,
Bargy. Like
that's true.
outside of that, it's two rosters chock full of challenger and grandmaster players that play almost exclusively exciting and like energetic champions. Like I expect Twisted Fate, Syndra to be contested picks in the mid lane. You expect Pantheon support, Thresh support
Oh
to
yeah.
kind of show their face in this series, and it should be a lot of fun to watch. It should be exciting to see these two teams really brawl it out, just because they have such similar champion pools and such similar styles, as you kind of pointed out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they're definitely going to be vying for the same, like you said, they're going to vie for the same champions. Even if you look to the jungle, Graves, Nidalee, I'm sure will be heavily contested as well, as both junglers can definitely play it. I'm curious to see if Gu gets to play the Lee Sin, because he's definitely shown that from time to time. And honestly, he's a really big player for the side of TBA as well.
And which leads me to, so we talked about it briefly. So Winthrop did make the change only last week. Sir Kenji is going to go from support, where he is a main, to jungle, where, like he said, he was a 2018 Scouting Grounds jungler. So this isn't a position foreign to him. But so Clyde will slide into that support position. From some going through some film and some different things, we see how much Clyde likes to rotate around the map. And you're playing around Sir Kenji that might have different priorities than they had throughout the season. And so I'm going to kick it to Dylan first. When you're a playoff team like TBA, where you've got all these things on the line, and all of a sudden you're against a team where you have one game of film with this new roster, that's like, it's like, to me, that translates as a non-player analyst sitting here, like backseating. It's like when a new champ comes out, you might end up with some novelty wins and skirmishes, right? That you just like flat out didn't expect, because you don't know what the heck to do with it. Like you don't know what this roster looks like functioning like this.
Yeah, it's really hard to come into a series like this and have accurate prep for him. I think you probably spend the last week prepping on the parts that you do know. People like Saskia, people like Doxa, these known quantities that have played on Winthrop for months, if not, years. These players have been around for a long time, and there's a lot of footage and there's a lot of talk around the scene of what they play and how they play. So I think you kind of focus on the parts that you do know, and you kind of just assume that, Sir Kenji, definitely a competent jungler, but he's
sure.
probably not going to
Oh, yeah.
be the focal point of this team if he's coming into the role at such a late point, right? He might have some good performances, but I think for the most part, you just assume, okay, well, our jungler is going to be able to outperform him slightly outside of any, like cheese or anything that happens. And you just focus on the players that you do know, and you kind of just build a strategy around countering them.
Yeah, and so well, as we're framing this entire series, right? So just a reminder for everyone, this is a best of 3. So yes, it is a knockout series, of course, but as it is losers, roughly quarterfinals. It, technically speaking, it's quarters. It's like round 3. But it is only best of 3. Winner will move on to play Zenith, who, as we know, they were a powerhouse of a team, but they were ultimately knocked out by Illinois State University, who obviously another great team. So we're getting to a point now where these teams, I think, are going to be so evenly matched, so tightly contested. And so tonight we get a privilege really in seeing 2 teams that do have such identical play styles actually ultimately vying this thing out. And so as we're spinning this forward, and I guess we'll start to touch on here what we might expect compositionally. And I'm going to start with Dylan on this one, because you both sort of mentioned that, like, all of these players, especially in TBA, are going to be used to sort of like selfish carries, or which is used in a positive way, kind of like in the same way in like a lot of professional junglers would be considered selfish, but they're not bad teammates. It's just how you structure the team. Yeah, how do you work around that many selfish lanes? Like what sort of things have to happen, or what things could go wrong, I guess, for people who aren't as familiar with selfish laning?
So in terms of how you play out the game, it's very important that you have like clear objectives in mind, right? So you see a lot of teams when they draft something like Camille or Renekton top, something like a Nidalee jungle, the first dragon of the game does not really matter to them. What they want to do is they want to secure that first Rift Herald. They want to look for a top dive, with something like a Twisted Fate mid, something like a Zoe that can get shoved in the mid lane, and they want to punish top lane. You basically want to funnel as much gold into these compositions, into these carries as possible. And these players have all, been practicing for months with this same kind of a style, and I'm sure that they'll know exactly how they should be playing out the map. I mean, expect to see a lot of skirmishes because these champions are strong early and they do like to take fights. Something like, we've said it before, but something like Graves Jungle, Pantheon support, these are all champions that would love to get into the river, get into the enemy jungle, and just start brawling from, level 3 onwards, honestly. So expect to see, Scuttle Crabs, Dragons, Rift Heralds. All of these will probably be contested by both teams and should be a lot of fun to watch. Honestly, I'm expecting a couple of bloodbaths in this series just because the teams, not only do they play a similar style, but they're very good players. And one thing that I've learned about the amateur scene is it's hard for players to kind of respect one another. So you're gonna, of course, play as if you're better than the other guy, and that usually leads to bloodbaths because he's usually thinking the same thing as you, right? So nobody really wants to turn down a challenge in this series.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But again, that's the beauty of them playing the same style. It's definitely going to be a lot more entertaining for all of you watching. And it's definitely going to still be really good for us to break down because there's going to be a lot of intricacies that we're going to see. And you even talk about the roaming, the Pantheon support, especially. We already talked about it. Winthrop's Clyde, he loves to roam. If he has a support that can make that impact in other lanes, you're going to see him on the move as well. So this is just basically a preview for what's exactly going to happen. We may as well be looking in crystal balls right now, because I can't express the confidence in which we state these things.
Right, honestly. And I guess that speaking of crystal ball, so let's play that, right? Let's look into the crystal ball here, because I'm getting word in my ear with my eyeballs, however you want to put it, from the back that the players are starting to file in for the draft. I mean, to me, coming into this, it's hard to imagine a world where you have this loaded TBA roster that has like expectations here, and then you have Winthrop and their expectations like reasonable, but they know kind of what they're against. And to touch on Dylan's point, you have great players that aren't going to turn down a challenge, but I feel like TBA is just a little bit more up to that task. Did you guys see anything that particularly led you to believe that maybe Winthrop is able to pull off what would, I think, be considered by most of us an upset tonight? Or do you think this is where TBA kind of shines despite the sort of jungle novelty they might be dealing with? I would start with Beatdown on this one.
So the interesting thing is, I think it's fair And a pretty common, if we look at the predictions as well, to expect that TBA are going to win this series. There's just more on the line for them with what they've shown us previously. They seem to have the capability to be able to take this series pretty handedly, but who really knows? It's not impossible for Winthrop to really pull through in this series because at the end of the day, yes, they're trying things out, but they could also end up trying something that works, that really works for the squad. For example, we talked about it already. Sir Kenji last week going back to the jungle role, a role he is by no means unfamiliar with, but one, it's not exactly his main role. But look, he ends up performing very well. And it's these kinds of things that can actually kind of give a bit of almost fresh air, if you will, to a roster. You find something that really starts working, you roll with it, and you can kind of carry that momentum on for the coming matches. So that could be something like what we see here. They might actually pair that with something else that they're going to try compositionally. Who knows? Maybe another role swap. And that could also work out really well for them too. Again, more on the line here for TBA, more motivation to play their best and win. But Winthrop definitely have the ability to throw a wrench in that desire.
Yeah, and for me personally, if I were to make a case for Winthrop, I would probably base it on their experience as a team, right? Because I know that they have a couple of new faces as opposed to, last year's collegiate scene, but they were, towards the end of, the spring, towards the beginning of summer, they were one of the better collegiate rosters. They were definitely challenging the likes of, Harrisburg. I wouldn't quite say they were at Maryville's level. They were getting up there, but they were challenging kind of that like upper echelon of collegiate, and they were winning a lot of games. I actually think that either they came very close to winning a tournament or they actually did win a tournament with a lot of high level colleges at it. So I think if you're going to make an argument for Winthrop to win this game, I think it's just based off their experience as a team. That they have undoubtedly, been together longer and probably played more scrims together and, played more high pressure tournaments than TBA has. And I think that this is the time to show it, right? In the losers finals, in the losers quarterfinals,
Quarters,
the loser goes home. There is no
Yeah.
second chance after this. So
That's right.
I think now is the time for them to really, show what they're worth, show all the experience that they have as a roster and use it to bring home, at least 2 wins today.
And I think that's another point too, that regardless of this outcome, I mean, I don't know what the list shakes out to look like, but Winthrop is definitely in the upper echelon of collegiate teams right now. Like, I don't think there's any question, right? Like, I know Illinois State's rolling right now. We have, GVU A and B in here, and obviously you have the Maryvilles and Wesleyans of the world. But I think Winthrop has to be in these discussions moving forward just because of the fact that they're in here and having this match in the first place, right? And obviously winning tonight, I think would open a lot of eyes. I know it certainly mine because I'm not expecting necessarily a win tonight, but if they do that, it's like, holy cow, like maybe Winthrop's really a team to watch out for moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the collegiate space is one that's pretty much ever changing because players are moving around so much, coaches are moving around. You never really know what's happening. But yeah, I think Winthrop has already kind of made a name for themselves in the collegiate space. They have a lot of good players, and one of the better rosters on paper out of any team, you could argue. And making it deep in this tournament, if not just winning it from a loser's bracket run, that'd be huge. There's not really any other competitions besides, maybe Upsurge. There is also, some like unofficial collegiate tournaments that are happening, but this is one of the bigger tournaments of the fall season. And if Winthrop can pull off a deep run here, they definitely move up those college rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would look great for them who, again, they're trying things out right now. They're trying to really figure out how they want to play with the roster they have currently going into that next season. Winning here in champs in the fall split would definitely be a good indicator for how well they're going to perform next split, at least in my opinion. So yeah, it is still definitely a lot for them to look towards here. There's definitely still some reason for them to really make an effort and win this one out. That's why I do think they still have a shot here to actually take the win.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate chance for anyone just joining us here on the pregame desk. We are preparing here for Winthrop University versus TBA here in losers round 3 or losers round 2, excuse me, losers quarterfinals, however you want to think of it. Tonight is a best of 3. I believe almost all the weeks after this on the stream will be best of 5. So this is one of the few short nights left on the schedule here. And the winner of tonight will be moving on to play Zenith, who got knocked out by Illinois State University. And, honestly, like, I think we're going to have a really well contested match. And, we're getting ready here for Pro Draft. So I'm going to start with Beatdown here. Final thoughts as we get ready to dive into this series.
Final thoughts for me. Well, I'm really just looking towards how Winthrop are going to play game one. I think that's going to be like a really big indicator for what they're trying to do in this series. Again, they're trying things out, and we're going to get an idea of what exactly they're trying out, especially with Sir Kenji still in the jungle role. So I think that's mostly what I'm on the lookout for and how well that's going to play out. And of course, I'm really interested to see how TBA play things out in game one as well, how they respond to what Winthrop are going to throw at them.
Yeah, and for myself, I feel like going into this first game, it's really important to kind of get off on the right foot, especially in a best of 3 compared to a best of 5. You don't really have that much room for error. If you go into this first game and either team just gets blasted in a one-side stomp, it's not really looking good for you in the second 2 games. So expect to see these teams kind of go back to comfort, go back to what they know, and, have a good but close game in this first game and, kind of get off on the right foot in this whole series.
Yeah, I ultimately think this series is going to be pretty evenly matched. I still think, I think TBA ultimately wins it, but I think Winthrop might have something up their sleeve, especially with these swaps that, maybe we didn't previously anticipate before. But with that, we are going to get ready here and toss it over for the draft. You're going to have it brought to you by the wonderful Tanner Metro and Chilling Walk. Fellas?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Analyst Desk, for tossing that over to us as we are just getting ready to jump into this draft for you guys. As you heard Paul say, my name is Tanner Metro. Today, I'm joined by the draft megamind himself in Chilling Walk. But you could probably just refer to us as the Bomber Bros as we tried to go for a little bit of matching here on the desk. His a little bit more dripped out with the fly quest there. But Chilling Walk, an exciting match. We heard the Analyst Desk breaking this one down. I think a word that they were kind of skirting around, but that sums up this matchup as a whole is volatility.
Yeah, you definitely said it, Tanner, because we look at Gu, we look at the mid laners for both these squads, Doxa versus Young, Gu versus Sir Kenji, a lot of young talent coming in, but the mid lane volatility, both high carry mid laners and, not really playing for the team, playing for themselves and making sure the team plays around them. Of course, supports roaming up to help them out as well is something that we're definitely going to have to keep our eyes on. Whoever gets that first kill can definitely swing that mid lane matchup and also make sure that they are the queen for that chessboard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said it because that's exactly where I was headed. A whole lot of moving pieces in the mid lane, the junglers making plays, the bot lane making plays in those supports. And so we kind of got a little bit of a breakdown how this game should shake out. And I think everybody kind of leaning towards that TBA side. Something that is kind of piqued my interest as a whole is since these roster changes, this Winthrop team has looked really strong, unfortunately losing to the #1 seed and possibly meeting them again should they take a series win today. But I think this new roster swap and this quote-unquote fun play style that they have, it bodes really well. It completely removes that mental stress when you don't have too much to necessarily look forward to as you are in the offseason for collegiate.
And that is one of the benefits of swapping out your rosters, right? And changing up the player dynamic, especially when it comes to a Winthrop and who they swapped out for. They swapped out Infectrix in the jungle. They swapped out Crab, Appleboy, Mordio in the jungle for Sir Kenji. And Sir Kenji came from that support role. Of course, as the Analyst Desk mentioned, the 2018 SG Scouting Grounds jungler who participated in Riot's Scouting Grounds is honestly a big breath of fresh air, especially with Clyde coming back in the bottom side. And that's usually what happens when a roster swap occurs, is that you just get to have a little bit more fun. You get to experiment with how the dynamics are going to be played throughout the team. And that's why it's going to be very good for Winthrop, especially, again, for the offseason of collegiate, because when we hit 2021 and everyone is looking to lock down that roster, if this roster works out, if Sir Kenji can actually be a gigantic leader for the squad and, lead him to victory, it's going to be proved pivotal, especially when we take a look at the likes of Maryville, Columbia College, Grandview was mentioned there, Harrisburg. A lot of these collegiate teams are looking to make a name for themselves and compete against the one who is, you could say, probably at the top, Maryville University. So we'll have to see how Winthrop can hold their own against them.
Yeah, and right now is the absolute best time, to do it and kind of prove your worth, especially with this new roster swap and support to jungle to support. It's not easy, but for Kenji, it has been fairly seamless. Now, one of the other things that we talked about the young guns, we talked about Goo going up against Kenji. This is a battle of the ages, right? We're starting to get to that point in esports as a whole, and as things progress, where the young bucks are starting to come up through the ranks and start to challenge some of the players who have been here for so long. So that matchup, specifically being a jungler myself, and then having seen Kenji play in these scenes for so long, is one that I'm super excited to kind of take a peek at, because we know Goo likes to play that aggressive style. Kenji can do exactly the same, but is A-okay when it comes to taking a back seat and allowing his, being that catalyst for his team to allow the players around him to kind of get ahead. And I think that jungle duo in the mid lane is going to be where we are looking mostly for this Winthrop team, as we are ready to jump right into the picks and bans here. It is going to be TBA on the red side to kick things off. So very strong mid laners. I'm curious to see if they save that last pick for that mid lane specifically.
I definitely think you should, Tanner, as you mentioned, because of the volatility in the mid lane. I would definitely want to pick a mid lane counter pick to make sure that you're able to, just impact the map. Doxa loves moving around the map. Young, of course, enjoys the one-on-ones too. And of course, Young and paired up with Goo, they're going to move around the map and impact everywhere. We take a look at TBA's wins so far. Goo, of course, back then when I was casting him against Rosh, he was the main benefactor of what happens when they win. The highest one with the kill participation, the highest one, and one of the ones with the least deaths compared to his kills and assists here. More than likely going to continue that forward. However, Winthrop and Sir Kenji, especially last week, Sir Kenji's looking like to be the biggest factor when it comes to their wins. As we already see here, high agency junglers and roamers, of course, from the support role, already being banned away, as Pantheon being removed away from Winthrop, and Nidalee being removed from Goo as well.
Yeah, and right there alone, a couple of champions that can turn the tide of a game, whether it be one specific play or that Nidalee in the early game starting to propel some of these lanes forward. Again, that's a pick that you want to take away from Goo because of how volatile he can be. We talked about it a little bit before we jumped into the show today, and it's that Blabber-esque early game, play aggressive, I'll get ahead, and then we can play around me if that's the case. So they do take away that Nidalee, so a nice pickup there. Camille did recently see some touches. I believe it's the attack speed coming off of that hook shot, but taken off the board, we don't have to worry about that. And Thresh, you heard the analyst desk talking about it. Thresh off the board, an incredible roaming support, and we know both of those guys down in that support role are looking to do just that.
However, I'm surprised that Lucian was left on the table. This champion is very high priority for both these teams. Doxa has great numbers on this champion. Same thing with Young, so we'll have to see if it gets picked up. Looks like it won't be. Instead, Winthrop already picking Sir Kenji's champion in the graves here, so we'll have to see how he manages to pilot this champion. It is a good takeaway, however, from Goo, as Goo also likes to have his hands on this champion as well. TBA, though, definitely changing it up a bit if they want to lock in the Syndra in the mid lane here. It is a good champion for Young, but we talk about that mid lane volatility. Picking mid lane this early also means that you're giving up that counter pick for yourself. So instead, it looks like TBA is going to lock that in. Hopefully they can work around this issue, maybe opt in for a jungle counter pick, or if not that, get a support counter pick so that Plux, the 2020 scouting ground support who comes in, can maybe influence the mid lane here and out-rotate Clyde.
And you said it, the Syndra coming through a little awkward, but they obviously have a game plan here. It's only a best of 3. We heard the analyst desk talking about that as well. So you don't have as much breathing room here in this losers bracket. So game number 1, you really have to pull out all the stomps, as the Kindred is going to be the answer to the Graves. And Winthrop, when we were looking at their match histories and their games, they had 2 typical play styles. It was let's just go all in and we're going to go as hard as we can. They also could take a step back, maybe play that pick composition, that poke composition as well in the Zoe, and toss in some engage where they need it. This one definitely looking like they have a couple of marksmen now who they want to keep protected. So I'm interested as that Echo gets locked in. It's not bad into the Syndra here, but again, we have to worry about who is protecting Jhin and Graves in this Winthrop comp.
Yeah, this is definitely a weird pivot from Winthrop itself. Knowing that Echo wants to dive in right now, no one's going to be helping him outside of the current call from Jin. So we'll have to see how Winthrop can maneuver around that. And along with that, you're also diving into a Kindred ultimate with the Lamb's Respite. So right now, this Echo fairly answered. And, if I'm TBA, I definitely would be happy locking in that Karma, because now you just have to kite away. You're now setting yourselves up to make sure that you're basically outgunning him from a distance here, and that's the game plan for TBA so far. More than likely, the bans that I want to see are hard engaged champions, as Haberaki, definitely well known for picking top laners who are just basically tanks, meat shields, and can be a front lane along with being an engaged source. So look to remove those away. Of course, they're already removing the Leona away from Clyde as well, one of his more comfortable champions, and of course a solid engaged tool for them. So right now, I definitely like what TBA is going for. As Winthrop going to be banning champions that can help kite away, as Ashe is definitely one of those champions.
Yeah, and like you said, the engage needs to be taken off the board. So we'll see what this last ban is going to be. And now I'm interested where they're saving it. It looks like possibly for the top lane, just so that Cozy Shroud can get a nice and cozy lane up there, as Darius taken away. And this is so funny to me because I think it was tossed out as a joke when we were breaking these teams down.
Yeah.
Possibly we see a Darius coming through, and TBA, they think the exact same thing, and they take it away from Haberagi. They do not want to see that beefy bruiser up top who can really do both roles for this team, can run right at the opposition, or can look to turn around and try and peel for some of these marksmen that they've got. So a nice takeaway as that 80 carry pool is targeted, and we get to see who Sean is left with now as they look to lock in their pick here for TBA. Aphelios did receive some touches, a little bit of buffs. This could be a breath of fresh air, and if this is locked in, then it does look like a counter pick for the top lane.
Yeah, but that's why I'm curious of why the Darius was actually banned. Knowing that Winthrop has already picked their AD, knowing that you're going to be looking to counterpick your AD carry on the bottom side, there's honestly not a lot of reason to ban any sort of top laners. And also, you're going to be running away from the Darius. You have 3 champions that do that so well. Unless Darius and Winthrop manage to get a flank, then I can understand. But still, Winthrop right now don't really have a lot of tools to get in your face. It's only going to be Echo with the phase dive and with the parallel convergence. But even then, that's a little bit harder to land on. Winthrop still going to be sticking to their guns and their game plan of putting Haberaki on a tank in the top lane. A good tank at that, as that's a good champion to get in your face, as Sion's ultimate with the onslaught can definitely run down a lot of these immobile champions on the side of TBA here. But Winthrop now, they're going to have to double down on if they're going to be looking to play the kiting game or going to be looking to dive in here. Personally, with yourself having Echo and Sion, you might just go all in, just put all the chips in the table, make sure you get in front of their face, and make sure you can actually get Kindred out of that Lance Spike and everyone else out. Because if you don't, it's going to be tough here. Set is definitely a champion that can get in their face and slam them down.
Yeah, that is a really nice pickup. It doesn't necessarily negate the Kindred as a whole, but at least one person, your priority target that may be alive, no longer live once Set takes him out of that Lamb's Respite. And then that's no big deal for the Vestayan, right? Can just drop that W. That Haymaker is going to give a nice shield, and that fight then turns on its head, as it's looking like a Renekton to go up top, and it is going to be locked in here. Renekton into the Sion Cozy Shroud. I don't know how I feel 100% about that, but obviously he's feeling pretty good about it. And it's a lane we do know that Cozy Shroud and Goo sometimes go hand in hand. That's a pretty scary lane. You have the setup from Renekton, you have the setup from Kindred to get the Kindred ahead as well. And I guess now we just have to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, but it's just definitely very curious of why the Renekton was picked up. Hopefully the analyst desk has better points, because personally for me, I am very worried about this Renekton pick from TBA, man.
So could it be just to propel them through this early game, knowing that Sion's going to be a problem late? Kind of either way, you have the 2 marksmen to hopefully deal with that, and then obviously you have the scaling around it. So maybe that Renekton pick just picked up. It's a little bit of comfort, and it's that early game that TBA might need. So that way they're not only losing that early game, but then once you lose that early game, it makes your late game composition kind of fall apart if you can't bring the pieces back together. An interesting one at that. I'm super excited now. We talked about volatility. Syndra, the one champion, or one of many champions in the mid lane that are being played right now, that has that one button outplay in the ultimate, the unleashed power there. And then Echo, it's picked directly for that Syndra. It does synergize well with this composition, but it is going to be both Doxa and Young just going toe-to-toe in this mid lane. I'm super pumped for those two picks specifically.
However, Syndra can definitely win that matchup early on, depending on how well Syndra plays the level 1 to 4. It could actually swing very heavily for Syndra and actually delay Echo's power spike. So we'll have to see how Young manages to play this out. It is gonna they are gonna have a lot of early game priority established from Gu and Young from TBA side. But again, man, I'm just so worried about Cozy Shroud. You know, if Matchko was here, he would definitely advocate for an Alawi pick here, Tanner. Right. I think I would too, personally, because you look at those two champions that are diving in, you look at Echo also diving in here. Alawi makes perfect sense. You don't have to put a lot of attention to it. If Sir Kenji were to rotate topside, then Alawi just basically gets to fight both of them for free, and that's where I would have liked that a lot, because Renekton, yes, it wins lane, but it doesn't protect the 4 champions that is paired up with it, and that's where I see the gigantic disconnect coming in. So we'll have to see if Cozy Shroud can make it work, especially being a bodyguard for the team, or if not that, being a split push threat for himself. That is one way that he can make it work. But however, for the rest of the 4, you know, hopefully they don't get flanked. Hopefully they don't get charged upon by Heibaragi, maybe on an overload play. So TBA, I'm definitely worried here. But if you are the better team, this should be a pretty solid composition to pilot to win the game.
Yeah, the point you made, they don't have a whole lot to protect the other 4 members on this team outside of that Lamb's respite that will keep everybody alive, but only momentarily. And you've got a couple of beefcakes now on the other side for Winthrop, rather. And we're going to have to see. We're going to send this one on back to the analyst desk to see if that Renekton pick is a complete bust for TBA or if it is going to be what it takes to win this game. Take it away, fellas.
Hey, thank you, Tanner and Walk. Awesome coverage of the draft. And I'm back on the desk, of course, with Dylan and Beatdown. And fellas, okay, so I'm going to start. So we had a couple question mark pings, missing pings on the draft going throughout. I'm going to start with Dylan here. Immediate thoughts, takeaways, and what you think is ultimately going to happen here.
Well, I mean, looking towards the side of Winthrop, I think that they secured themselves a pretty solid composition. You know, I think the Graves and the Jhin early on makes sense. I think the Echo into Syndra matchup, you know, in a vacuum makes sense. You know, Syndra doesn't really want a side lane. Echo can just shove her in, you know, get control with Graves. I think everything's okay. Their last 2 picks are a little weird for me, right? Because if I'm this jungler, if I'm Sir Kenji on Graves, where do you really look to go on this team, right? You're probably looking towards bot lane because it doesn't really matter if you gank for a Scion. But I feel like, as you were kind of talking about, Paul, the karma just kind of kites away the set. And it makes it pretty hard for anything to actually happen around the bot lane. We're going to have to see how that actually pans out because, I mean, we're expecting Aphelios karma to shove. So my eyes are on how Winthrop can kind of manipulate the bot lane waves into, you know, being beneficial for them. If they can look down bot for ganks, if they can look down bot for dragons, I think that's their key to getting an early/mid game lead and then kind of, you know, transitioning that later on.
Yeah, and I think Will said it really well there when the draft was actually going on. Especially, I was a little confused with the Echo pick as well. Like you said, Dylan, really great in a vacuum into the Syndra. Syndra doesn't want to side lane against Echo. That's all well and good. But who's going to be really helping this Echo go for dives? Scion, not bad. Set, I don't think so. If I look at the majority of TBA's composition, how's the set going to get into E range of any of these champions? Syndra is going to want to play back. Kindred can easily kite. Karma, Aphelios are going to stay back anyway. The only one he can really potentially get on top of is this Renekton, who's going to be sitting on the front. But at the end of the day, he's going to probably be able to slice and dice right out of that actual situation there. So Winthrop, I think, have a lot of problems with engagement, and the burden of execution is really going to fall onto them. I think the only thing with TBA's composition that we actually talked about before coming back here is that maybe instead of Renekton, maybe see an Ornn, because Ornn would have actually really complemented this composition really well. Plenty of potential ornaments all across the board for TBA's composition, but having that Renekton means there's a lane you can play for early if you're Gu. There's a lot of dive threat with this Renekton. So it still does work out, but now this early game for this top laner is going to be super important and potentially make or break.
And that's the key point, I think. And I think that's the scary part of two teams that are willing to take trades, is that you're putting so much weight in this early game onto this Renekton. And Wak mentioned Matt Magic were here. He would be very in favor of an Alawi, like something just with a little more protection against that sort of dive. But I think your point's really legitimate too. And it was funny, before the set was picked, I think I was like, let's see, I'd love to see a non-list here.
I agreed with you. I love that.
Yeah. And then once the set was picked, I was like, I'm still a little bit torn, but I think ultimately, to your point too, is like, how is Set going to get in there? Like, yeah, sure, level 3 you can flash E if you somehow catch TBA out, but after that, like where are you really going? Like, I understand, and maybe there's some logic to the you showstopper out of a Lamb's Respite, but like by and large, and I don't even like Sion that much as an engage tool. I'm not crazy about Sion just like ramming his face into the other team. I think I've never liked it as an option. Maybe they are going to be able to do that, but we'll ultimately see how it plays itself out. Now, we are going to get ready to go back into the game here in just a moment, but so loading into this really, really quick, guys. Either thing stand out in draft start with Dylan, like hyper quick. Any team stand out in draft in a big way, or just TBA stuff?
I think Winthrop's going to play through bottom. I think TBA is going to play through top, and I think just because of their players that TBA is going to come out on this one.
Yeah, I got to agree. I really think Winthrop, especially towards the end, kind of drafted themselves into a bit of a hole. It's going to take quite a performance, especially from Sir Kenji, who's going to have to play through bot lane to be able to make this work for Winthrop.
Yeah, and we are set for an incredible one. So you're going to hear Tanner and Wak, and you're going to see the rift here in just a second. Tossing it over. We'll see you after the game.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live here. Game number 1 in a best-of-3 series between Winthrop University and TBA. The winner moves on to play the number 1 seeded Zenith Esports. The loser goes home. As you heard, I am still Tanner Metro. I am still joined by Chilling Walkin'. Now we get to see what that Gator does up in the top lane. Hopefully it's good things for this TBA roster.
Yeah, Goo. You know, previously when I was watching TBA, he's always been putting his attention towards Cozy Shroud. So if his MO is still the same, expect Goo to play towards the top side. However, Goo has been known to play towards the other lanes as well. Basically, wherever Goo is, expect action there. And also expect the teammate that he's with, proximity of the most, to also be the person who's going to be getting the most kills and the assists as a part of their team. So if Cozy Shroud is making this call, especially in draft, and Goo is saying, yeah, I'm down for it, then expect those camping.
And all quiet on the Western front here on the Rift. Nobody trying anything funny just yet. We are going to have that split setup here where the junglers starting on the opposite side of the map. And Goo actually opting in to go leashless here. So not a whole lot of information and maybe enough to put this bot lane ahead. We highlighted Plux. He is going to be that player headed to the 2020 scouting grounds. But this bottom lane from Winthrop are no slouches as well. I believe it was 2019 winning collegiate championships together. So for Maryvale, again, the bottom lane is going to be a close matchup in itself. And then it's all about what the junglers can do around the map here. Is Cozy Shroud unfortunately not getting the best of these trades in the early game. I'm sure like he was assuming.
You know, Tanner, I actually want to have some limelight on the bot side because, you know, I know that the analyst was talking a little bit about what they could have picked support instead of the set here. Honestly, I would have loved the Blitzcrank here. Making sure a kiting composition walks back into you is something that is truly a great pick that I know that Clyde has in his pocket, and it's a little unfortunate that he didn't pick it up, so we'll have to see what Clyde can do with this set here. It does have a lot of skill expression. That's something that I do appreciate when it comes to set as a champion, so hopefully Clyde can make that work. He does have the phase rush, which is something good to see, but right now both these guys, you know, they're just okay farming it out.
And Cozy Shroud actually going to be able to take the shield down there. A little bit of damage traded back and forth, but not too much to be worried about as Cozy Shroud does ding 3 and could possibly maybe look for that slice and dice engage. Unfortunately, not going to have that stun available just yet. Now, again, to kind of bounce back to the bottom lane just as a whole, this Gen set bottom lane, it's not looking too hot. Just as the champions, when you look at them alone and you do see them getting pushed in, Is this going to affect the way that Kenji can play around this game? Is it going to be more around the bot side as we do see a quick one up top? Cozy Shroud is able to flash and dash. Does make it out alive, but again, that flash expended up in the top lane.
Yeah, I was going to mention this a little bit earlier, Tanner, but I'm surprised that Cozy Shroud wanted to burn a lot of his health just to get the wave in, knowing that Goo was going to be pathing towards the bottom side. So honestly, a good punish overall from Winthrop University. Usually, Cozy Shroud likes to play this aggressive, but you have to respect where jungles are starting. You had the intel as well as bottom side didn't really go in, but in mid lane, Sir Kenji's just going to say hi. Good stun comes in, but nothing too crazy so far.
That's that Syndra just getting the better of the matchup, like you stated in that champion select. This dragon going to be spawning up in just a moment, and we'll get to take a look to see. It is going to be that Ocean Drake, and now that just means no Ocean Soul here in this game, so we'll have to pay attention to what we see as those recalls come on through. And Kenji actually looking up towards that top lane again, maybe going to punish some of the aggression. Low HP on Heibaragi, but unfortunately the Gator might not have the way to get out. It's the flash, it's the dash. It is not available, and it is first blood going over to Kenji. And if it's the war of the junglers, it is Kenji on top.
You gank him once and he burns flash. You can just gank him again because he doesn't have that flash. And Cozy Shroud on this champion now being down to death. Giving the kill over to Sir Kenji is honestly so good. You want to make sure the carries get that gold and make sure that Sir Kenji actually gets a lot of it moving forward. But Goo might have gotten caught out.
Yeah, and this is not a place you want to be. That Echo should be able to chase down a bit. Fortunately, had some potions in a mid lane there in the back pocket. Actually opted into the biscuits as well in that those rune pages. So a nice pickup, probably keeping the Kindred alive in that skirmish. And that's one of those things where if you're young, you're winning this lane, you're doing your darndest as this Syndra into the range, into the melee for now. If your jungler gives up a kill right there, that feels horrible as some trading happens on the bot side, but I can't imagine too much comes out. Actually, a couple of roots. Saskia needs to be careful, not respecting the damage, and that's the buffed up Aphelios. Sean's gonna grab the second blood here in this game, and in the mid lane, a kill actually sneaks on through. It's Young Mid punishing the Echo here. Doxa going down. Young Mid finally gonna go ahead and head on back to base now with a chunk of change in the pocket, and we'll see where this build goes, but it doesn't stop. This is volatile, and it's as volatile as it gets as Clyde is able to stay alive for a moment longer. The Ignite is on, but the kill's gonna be traded back and forth. Now Plux, unfortunately, does not have an 80 carry to try and save him on the way out. The minions were there, the flash forward, there's the shield, is gonna look for the root. Ooh, not gonna find it, end of the line. Just too short, not wide enough, and Plux, that is the scouting ground support right there. What an outplay around the minions to get away from that Graves.
And I remember when we talked about both these teams, and they love to fight.
Yeah.
This is a gigantic, clear example of why they just down a fight and down a burn center spells just to get some gold in their pocket, as Clyde may have found Goo, and he has to get out of here. Backup's already coming in.
Yeah, and Clyde first to the roam out of the supports. Goo only level 5, does not have the flash available, trying to get over the wall. Dance of Arrows is there, but so is the Haymaker. It's Clyde to find the kill. We're knotted up at 3 kills apiece, but that gold lead's still in favor for TBA.
Almost a kill a minute. Right now, Tanner, as everyone just looking to see what kind of mental game they want to play for. Kenji already having 2 kills is definitely going to be good on his end. And however, Sean on the bottom side, block as you see in on stream right now, picking up a kill and having a 13 CS lead is something very valuable for himself. We don't really see a lot of Philos coming in, but with a composition made to kite back, Philos is a champion that can definitely do it, but the backup is here. Sean, he can't get out of this.
Yeah, and Saskia able to stay alive underneath the turret. Smokescreen goes down. Quick draw there as well, resetting the auto attacks, and it's another kill here. A killing spree for Kenji. And this is the old dog showing the young buck here how to get it done. 3-0-0 on this Graves. And the Kindred, to this point, unfortunately, Goo has just been silenced. I still think markless for the Kindred.
It just needs to show some respect from TBA. All laners just playing a little bit too aggressive. From Cozy, from Sean and Plux here. Maybe it's just the confidence coming in, knowing that Winthrop is taking a little bit more fun, and also, testing some waters out. But when you're testing, when you're playing around with your roster, and especially playing with your champion pool, there are things that you cannot anticipate. And some of these mistakes are honestly very fundamental. You can't be looking to walk up on a wave when it's not really set up here. You can't really be doing those things when Goo isn't on the same side of the map. So these punishes are definitely going in favor for Sir Kenji. Already 3 kills in himself, but Goo and Flux, well, they have their sights on the dragon, but I think Saskio is definitely going to spot them out.
If Saskio sniffs this one out, is able to drop a ward. Unfortunately, the Deadly Flourish does not find this steal, and back in the mid lane we go. It's Young. Now the curtain call comes down, flashes to get away from the damage. The rest of the team is here. It is a level 6 Kindred, so the Lamb's Respite is available, but instead of fighting like we anticipated, everybody gonna walk away from this one. Only taking a bit of damage, so dare I say unscathed.
There's a trade that is happening on the top side, though. Sir Kenji is taking the Rift Herald for himself. As right now, just a trade of objectives, but the Ocean Drake is definitely going to prove good, especially for a kiting composition. But if I'm Winthrop University, using this Rift Herald to make sure that you can actually move around the map and get those flanks off of Clyde and off of Haberagi is going to be really good if you manage to snowball off of the first turret take. So keep that in mind and pay attention to where Sir Kenji wants to use this. Once a turret breaks down, everyone's going to be moving around the map, and if Winthrop is moving as a 5-man death ball, it's definitely going to be in favor for them as long as they find those flanks.
Yeah, and this gold lead, and now it's so very close. It was, I believe, 700 gold at 1.4 TBA. Now it's only 200. Top laner is here, trying to go into the unstoppable onslaught. Not going to find too much. Clyde will go in. They find a heap of damage on the Flux, but he's still alive. Flux makes it out, but Sean cannot say the same, and I may have spoken too soon. Deadly Flourish will land. The root is not there. A little bit of a heal, a little bit of a shield, and it's going to be enough to get the karma away, but the junglers are going toe-to-toe, and Goo, unfortunately, should fall here in the 2v1. The recall comes out from the Scion. It's Doxa to get it done. And Will, we saw a little bit of beef in the chat before the game. Goo, unfortunately, falling to the opposition here.
Yeah, in the chat, in the chat, Goo wrote that he will run over Doxa. Right now, Doxa sitting 1-1-1, Goo sitting 0-2, so not a pretty sight and not a good claim to make here. I'm pretty sure Goo will just listen back in as we going to see take a look at a replay, I think, as I heard my producer saying here. And this is where Haberagi actually makes a really sneaky little reset to make sure he overloads on the bottom lane. Because of Plux and Sean not really knowing where Haberagi was, because he just came down here off of a reset, they just assumed it was going to be on 2-on-2, maybe a 3-on-2 if you were to come from Krugs and help him out. But with Haberagi here and Sir Kenji collapsing down, it becomes a 3-on-2, and of course with everyone on the bottom side and Cody Shroud not having that teleport, that's a gigantic wipe in favor for Winthrop.
Yeah, and that right there, aggression punished again, where Goo, the fight's happening on the bottom side. What do you think's going to happen? Where do you think everybody's going to be? He's trying to sneak those Krugs away and get out, but unfortunately runs into the enemy jungler and the mid lane. It was 5 members from this Winthrop team hovering to the bottom side. The Rift Herald has since been put down. It went bottom lane, it picked up the first turret, and that goal lead now has swung huge in favor of Winthrop. And it was a fairly close game here. Now this is where you get a little bit scared, right? This is where you're kind of looking at that Renekton as Doxa looking for more here. Is going to get rooted up, has the ultimate available, not necessarily needing it just yet. Young mid going to get rooted up and possibly taken down. He gets pulled back by Clyde. It's the face breaker, and it's Kenji with another. Now Goo trying to make his way out, but he cannot, and there's nothing to keep him invulnerable. The mark will pop up, but it's a little too late. That's just a gray screen for Goo. Now it's a Moonlight Vigil out from Sean. Not enough damage to find a kill as Clyde Hex flashes over the wall, just flexing the muscles a little bit, just as Set does. And it's all starting to come unraveled for this TBA roster.
And this all just started off of the continuous bot lane aggression from Sean and from Plux, getting punished by Winthrop. And with all this punishing going in, it just means that Saskio and everyone else can move around the map. Of course, Jin isn't able to really pump out that damage because he has to walk all the way up and, use those 4 auto attacks to, output his damage. But he could definitely impact from, a gigantic screen away, as right now, they have their sights on the other side of the map.
Yeah, this should be an easy one up top. Unfortunately, the Gator has no way out against 3, and The Jhin was able to grab and assist there, so Sasuke not going empty-handed. But it's not only the support Roman this time around, it is the bot lane as well, or the AD carry. Now Kenji in a bit of trouble, forced to flash away to stay alive. Would have been a nice pickup, especially for Young in the mid lane. Unfortunately, not able to find too much there, and now TBA, they're going to have to start stretching to make plays here as this next dragon spawn in momentarily.
However, their composition is still really good as a 4-man unit. Cozy Shroud basically just going to be a front line for the rest of the squad here. So as long as they can get to their first items and their second item, some of these fights actually might be close just due to the Lamb's respite, and as long as it's a front-to-back team fight. Keep in mind that Gook is really good at melting tanks. Young has, of course, a Scour of the Week to make sure any sort of aggression is stopped, and Plux can give everyone else a move speed. And you definitely do not want to be walking into an Aphelios if that Aphelios has 2 items. So we'll have to pay attention to where these fights are going. But right now, Winthrop, they're down to just push the pedal to the metal because of the influx of gold that they have received.
Yet TBA might be able to sneak away a dragon, but at what expense, as Cozy Shroud is forced off of the turret. So the Mountain Drake does feel nice. The resistances are there as well. And it's the Cloud Drake now and the Cloud Soul that we will find later in this game. It's textbook though, right? It's textbook from this Winthrop roster where you give up 2 dragons, you play for the Rift Herald, you play for that gold lead and your individual leads, and then you just fight for the rest of the dragons here on out. And having 4 Cloud Drakes is going to feel amazing. And to go back to your point, that you called it perfectly, it was the lanes not necessarily playing the tightest for TBA, and they're losing in the individual play. But as a full unit, we might start to see them come online unless this gold lead grows to be too much, as Sean is able to get a bit of damage onto Heibaragi. It's not too much, and the Scion's only getting tankier here.
I will say, though, Tanner, that TBA does have a good amount of wave clear, so if any sort of seeds were to come up from Winthrop, then they should be able to hold their own with Plux and the Mantra Flame, with Young and the Spheres, and of course Kindred and the auto attacks from Sean as well. So the wave clear side for TBA should be fine. The biggest thing, of course, is if Winthrop wants to pull off that dive with the 4K gold lead. Maybe once these item breakpoints come through, and if Heibaragi manages to pick up another tank item, they could definitely pull those dives. However, the longer this game goes, the better it will be for TBA to pick up these items. So just keep in mind how the game state goes, and if Winthrop wants to accelerate this game.
Yeah, and as we're talking about items here in acceleration, we do see that completed Infinity Edge for the Aphelios, as the second Rift Herald is going to go the way of Winthrop University. And again, just said it's not placed, but it could be another turret to fall, as they are up 2-0 in turrets. They're up just over 3,500 gold, and now looking to siege down this mid lane. Gu is able to put down the control ward and hopefully stop some of this vision. Now queued up as 4 right here by the mid lane, with the Echo not too far up top. Doxa could easily join this fight, and we may see some skirmishing right around this mid lane. It's Cozy Shroud coming on the flank, though. He's going to look for the slice and dice. He finds it onto Sasuke. Lots of damage comes down. Sasuke will fall. That's the first kill here in this fight, and it looks like Winthrop want to try and find a way out. The smash is there. The ultimate to come through from Heibaragi, but it's not enough to find a kill. Now the teleport's going to come down as well. It is Doxa making his way into the fight, but Cozy Shroud is so tanky. Clyde's going to try and pull Cozy Shroud away. A couple of kills are going to be traded back and forth, but it's still going to be the fight the way of TBA, and they're looking for more. Gu is able to find one. The Scion passive will try and run him down, and the 2 remaining members cannot help from Winthrop. A huge fight from TBA.
Cozy Shroud finds the miracle flank on Sasuke onto the AD carry, as they're looking to continue on to Sir Kenji, but looks like Sir Kenji's going to be going down with a gigantic shutdown going in. In fact, they still want to continue on, Tanner, as honestly, these guys are just slugging their way out. Curtain Call comes down, and unfortunately, they shouldn't be able to get a kill, but that fight was something that was well needed. Major shutdown gold coming back in, along with that, Sean living at the end against Doxa in the mid lane here. So definitely a fight well needed. I mean, take a look at the gold lead. It's basically tied up, Tanner.
Yeah, I mean, with that turret, it does get completely knotted up here just at 30,000 gold a team. And that was Exactly to your point. I mean, a round of applause, Will, because you called it just as it was. Once we get grouped up here for this TBA squad, they should be able to make something happen. And I think, against popular opinion here, that Renekton was so huge, and we were a little wary about that pick, but Cozy Shroud is making it seem so easy and so seamless on the Gator.
I want to take a look at this replay real quick here, Tanner, as this is the flank that actually started pulled up here. This is where Cozy Shroud managed to get the flank from the bottom side on a Saskio, and just pay attention to how the rest of TBA moves together as a three-man unit here. Even though Sean is only sitting on 200 HP, doing plucks, and everyone else is retreating while kiting around his damage. And look at the one person that is trying to dive in actually get punished by Cozy Shroud being the linebacker for his quarterback in Sean. And that's how the composition should be played out here. The moment that fight is won, they look to go for the chase. Goo as Kindred is really good at actually continuing the push here, as we're going to jump right back in. But that is how you play a kind of competition. As long as they keep on doing that, it will look good. But right now, Clyde, he is around the corner. And same thing with Cozy Shroud.
Yeah, both of them looking for the flanks here as the ultimate comes through. The showstopper not going to stop the show too much. Unfortunately, they can't grab a whole lot. That Rift Herald not going to get too much as well. Definitely a little flub there from Winthrop thinking they can grab that mid lane turret. But as we stated, now they're in a position where they can start to fight for these dragons. It is a little scary, though, because that gold has now gone in favor of TBA. It's been such a back-and-forth game, and it's only been small margins separating these teams. I'm not too sure coming into that fight if Saskio had his IE completed, but just before things kicked off, I was highlighting Sean's IE completed on the Aphelios, and then he had himself one hell of a team fight, staying alive for so long and barely not making it out to the end of that haymaker there. Now, as everybody's looking to reset in this one, lanes reset as well. We're all knotted up in turrets. The gold is incredibly close, and now the dragons are about to be tied up. And 4 Cloud Drakes for this Winthrop team could be devastating. It means more curtain calls. It means more engages from Clyde and Hey Baragi. It's not a whole lot coming from the Graves and Echo, but at the very least, you would be taking that away from TBA, who have those outplay buttons in Smashing R.
Yeah, but right now we look at TBA's items, and we take a look at TBA's gold. You know, it's a lot right now as we see a gigantic CS discrepancy across the board from all the laners here. 173 versus 132, 188 against 163, and of course, another 188 versus 142, and we take a look at Winthrop, and why they're at a CS discrepancy is because of the way they're playing and because of the early turret takes here. You know, Ellis has coined it. If you were to take turrets, if you were to take silent turrets, the opponent can basically just freeze and allow to free farm, and that's what's working well for them. It's a good thing they got that miracle fight, because if they didn't, they would have tied up that goal. But the moment they do, that CS lead now becomes a big factor as to why they're hitting their second item break points here. Young picking up the Void Staff, and now, of course, Sean having the Hurricane as well means that their team fight strength is very much, you know, on steroids. So fighting against this 2-item TBA is a monumental way to go if I'm Winthrop, unless if I find, again, that flank.
Now we see the unstoppable onslaught coming on through. Clyde can go over the wall onto 2. The land respite comes down. Plus is able to get away, but it's only Goo stuck in the ultimate. Goo will fall. Saskio going to be the benefactor of that kill. And unfortunately for TBA, this fight does not go in their favor.
Great job catching him out on the 1-3-1, as we already see Young on the top side and Cozy on the bottom, and that's why that flank worked out. But the more these flanks occur from Winthrop, the more these solo lanes are able to generate a CS lead, and looks like they're okay sticking to their guns, as we see Young still sitting on the top lane, now moving towards the bottom, and Cozy Shroud, instead of playing the front line, the linebacker for the rest of his squad, instead it looks like he wants to be a running back and try and see if he can, you know, flank everyone else out and get to that touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think a touchdown is the best way to describe exactly what he did in that last fight. Now, we see that that's kind of how those fights have to go. We're going to be keeping our eyes on Cozy Shroud, but that, of course we are, but so is Winthrop, right? Now they have to be paying attention to those flanks. That vision game needs to be through the roof, and as you stated, it starts to get a little harder in these team fights as they are coming up because of the leads that have been grown in the side lanes. Right now, looking at Young, that's a very scary Syndra, and you really only have that Scion as that frontline tank. You know, you let a Scatter the Weak go through, find a stun. One ultimate from Young should be able to sit down one of these squishies, depending on that target. And now, the running back here is going to use his Chevra legs to get out of dodge in the bottom lane. Kenji and Doxa looking for something, unfortunately unable to find, but a bit of damage on the Gator as the pings come around towards the mid lane. Dragon not spawning for another minute, but we should see some vision popping up right around this pit as these teams look to battle for it. Teleports available for both top laners and mid laners as well. And as we get some word from the producers here, the Observer, we're still sitting on one mark as a Kindred, and as a Kindred player myself, you feel like a caster minion. So that Lamb's Respite is really the majority of the utility you're going to get from this Kindred around this dragon fight.
Yeah, unfortunately, Gua hasn't had the best kind of game, as you said, sitting on one mark, and sitting at 1-4 and 3-2. He was pretty confident in the lobby, Tanner, saying that he'll definitely dominate, but this game, I think he called it a little bit too early as the ultimate's already coming in from Haberagi.
Yeah, there's the engage. Not going to find too much. It will push away TBA. Gain river control, but the flash comes out. Haberagi has to be careful. Low on HP. Clyde's going to go to the back line. Cozy Shroud will follow. And Doxa's on the outside. Still full HP, but TBA health bars are starting to fall. Sean is able to pick one up, and he's going to keep moving forward on the Aphelios. He's not done just yet. It's another kill to come through. It's 3-0 in favor of TBA. That engage has since failed for Winthrop, and it's looking like TBA want to take it all. The dragon has spawned, but they're more interested in the ace as Sean coming up on the side. The stun comes through to stop Cozy Shroud. Doxa trying to find what he can. He flashes away from the stun. He will get rooted up. Go golden. And Kenji, you just need to get out of dodge. He tries to fight for what he can. A beautiful stun on the outside of the Lamb's Respite. It's not an ace, but it's 4 that TBA will gladly take.
Winthrop University walking to a choking. That's what happens if you are Winthrop trying to go for TBA. You have to get those points up. It doesn't matter if you have the item advantage, or it doesn't matter if you manage to output a little bit more damage in the early stages, because the more you walk into them, the more you're going to be facing everyone else, single targeting you down, and that's what happens to Haberagi. He can't be walking in like that. And also, he has a Titanic Hydra. He's not tanky enough to sit there and soak all that damage. So we have to have Winthrop look for these creative flanks and set up those wards. You have double TPs. Utilize them.
Yeah, and Haberagi, you only have health, and that is what Aphelios is so good at shredding. We definitely need to see from this Winthrop top laner some more beef, especially to be the front line. And what an awkward engage, and it almost was on Goo. I thought maybe for a second Goo was going to be, on the other side of a death yet again, looking at 1 and 5, but what a turnaround as a whole. Now, TBA are on Soul Point here, looking for that Cloud Soul, which will just allow them to run this team down like they've been doing once they pop that Dominus. Sean, this is a frontline of Aphelios. He just runs right at the opposition. So you toss the Moonlight Vigil out and you have the movement speed behind it. Hey, I don't see why not. That is playing exactly to this play style. And just as we said, these teams are going to be volatile. They will fight for whatever, whenever. But now we're seeing this always hold W mentality coming out from TBA. And it has been paying off. Now, Plux, he's been a sneaky one. He's been a tricky one to take down. He will finally fall. That is going to be his first death, but the Moonlight Vigil will root up to underneath the turret, but TBA doesn't care. It's a killing spree for Sean McGod. It's the fight being turned around here. Cozy Shroud is going to eat a few of these shots from the ultimate out from Jin. Now, Haberagi in this fight, so much damage coming out. He's so tanky. The stuns on stuns, the smash on smash, and the Lamb's Respite might not be enough. It's going to be a shutdown going the way of this Jin, but they're turning it back around. Haberagi not going to get enough with that passive. 2 members still alive here for Winthrop as that passive dies down. It's Clyde, it's Doxa, but it's another fight for TBA, catching out Kenji to kick things off.
Man, Tanner, that was the most insane Lamb's Respite I've seen from Goose. Saved 3 members in that fight, and that was one of the reasons why that fight worked out well. Of course, they did find Sir Kenji in the beginning, but you have to be careful now if I'm Winthrop University. Losing these fights and also losing these summer spells is not going to be too good. Of course, they're trying to punish it, but summer spell usage is very core, especially when both these compositions are countering each other here. Even though you have all that Baron Vision, even though you're looking to control themselves, TBA, they're looking like the better team when working as a 5-man unit, and it's going to show. They've won multiple team fights back-to-back.
Yeah, and this feels okay. Kenji maybe getting caught out again. It's Plux wanting some revenge. The blast cone will keep Kenji away from that route for now, but possibly getting run down as those pings come out. Everybody wanting to be careful here. Goo now needs to be careful. No dance of arrows, will not be able to dash away. No flash available either, but the Baron, okay, started up momentarily. Clyde maybe getting a little ahead of himself, and before that last fight had kicked off, it was the support for jungle trade. Winthrop was the team who were overreaching. I said TBA would be that team earlier in the game, but Winthrop just trying to grab so much. It was a moral victory and giving Flux their first death, but just not enough. Now it's dark in the river. Still gonna be able to walk away from the smoke screen there. Hey, Broggy, now starting to come into that role of being a front line, but still not too tanky. As Cozy's still pushing on the bottom side. Doesn't have teleport for a little bit, and Kenji's getting caught out again. That's going to be Sean to pick that one up, and he's going to keep moving forward just as Sean does. Saskio's able to get out alive for now, and Clyde tries to turn the fight around, but the Aphelios is just too strong. It's a triple kill for Sean the God, and it should be the Dragon, or the Baron rather, to come the way of TBA.
Yeah, Winthrop, you cannot be doing that kind of move, and especially when you're trying to walk in here, you have to make sure that you get your side lanes established and ready, and then look to invade into your jungle. That's what Doxa was trying to do, but unfortunately, you're just pushing that trigger way too far. As TBA, they have all 5 members on their lap, all 5 members on this Baron, so Community is nowhere around here, and this Baron honestly might have just sealed the deal for TBA to secure this victory.
It was looking so good in the early game. I had thought the Renekton would be enough. Now, they're finding Doxa. He's forced to use the ultimate. He goes right back into the opposition there. Young was there to secure the damage. Cozy is there to secure the kill. And I said it earlier, but it's all starting to come unraveled. This time for Winthrop, they had their leads, but they tossed them away in a few sloppy team fights. Now we might see what could be one of the last team fights of the game. Granted, we are only 30 minutes in, but this is not a dragon you can just hand over to TBA.
Yeah, but down Doxa means that it's really tough to actually even to contest this this Cloud Drake or this Cloud Soul, because Cozy Shroud has a teleport online. It gets melted because you have basically 3 damage dealers hitting it with a lot of single target damage, and this is just increased mobility when these fights were to come out. You know, if Aphelios activates that ultimate, he gets to run away. If Cozy Shroud activates the ultimate, he's able to just be a better D-line for the rest of his squad, and of course Plux activating his ultimate means that everyone else just gets to run a lot faster. So Winthrop, it's a pretty tough way to try and stick onto him, and that's where, you know, maybe if it was the Blitzcrank pick, maybe if it was something else, maybe if they actually want to just maintain the artillery usage with Saskio and make sure they're playing around the Jhin, it would have been a different game. But right now, unfortunately, all the early game plays, all the early game aggression is just getting canceled out, especially at the mid game fight. But this is where they want to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the call here. 2 ultimates going to be used. Kenji taking low again here as Goo going to go right on into the fight. He's going to be jumping out with the Lamb's Respite to stay alive. Fight on the backside will fall to Sean, and the Aphelios is still big scatter. As the rest of this TBA team, the stuns come through, and Young is popping off in this one. Cozy Shroud on the back line. He's tanking it all up. He's got the turret. They've got the ace. They've got the fight, and this is going to be game number 1 going the way of TBA.
All right, Tanner. You know, Winthrop, they had a good idea of how to play that game, right? They had a good way of trying to accelerate it, but unfortunately, it just kind of bit them in the butt, you know? Mm-hmm. A lot of these team fights, they were going right into choke points. A lot of these team fights, they were taking your front to back, and of course, the mid lane fight where Saskio got flanked by Cozy Shroud. You know, the top laner who actually went in this top side 0-2 and lost his first turret, manages to find the winning play that puts him back into the game, and respects for TBA, and also respects to Cozy Shroud, because I personally didn't like that pick, especially in a 5-man unit, but that was the play that got them back in the game. And the moment that, you know, they read that Winthrop University wants to fight, they're like, sure, as long as we're here first, and as long as you're fighting our territory, we're going to take this fight 9 times out of 10. And we see what happens, and that's the result. TBA, they take the victory.
Yeah, it was a scrappy one at that, back and forth throughout the entire game. And again, Winthrop University had their opportunities, but They still have some chances. They're only one game down. It is still a best of 3, so they have a shot at redemption in a reverse sweep. And I know you didn't feel great about the Renekton pick. I know the analyst desk didn't feel great about that Renekton pick. So we are going to look to throw it on over to our analyst desk to see not only how they felt about that pick, but that game as a whole. Here in just a second, Renekton, the Gator, doing it all by himself there by Cozy Shroud.
Yep. And welcome back to the analyst desk, everybody. I'm Paul with Dylan and Beatdown once again. Thank you, Walk and Tanner, for an awesome cast there. And fellas, wow, that game. Okay, so Winthrop, really strong start. There was a lot of momentum there. And then this magical thing called Aphelios coming online happened. And I want to start with you, Dylan, on that. Like, Aphelios just blew up, but like, where obviously, like, that's one of the big turns, but where did you really see the flip happen, that moment where it was like, oh geez, like Winthrop actually might not be able to wrangle this one in fully?
I mean, as soon as Winthrop got their early advantages, right, we saw them up about 2,000 or 3,000 gold after they used that first herald. I think they tried to overreach on a number of occasions. We saw that the play that got TBA back into the game, Saskia was farming mid alone, stepped up too far. They didn't account for Renekton. They didn't have defensive vision down. And Clyde and Sirkenji were off looking for some red buff invade in the top side. So, you can't leave Saskia alone there. Or if you're going to, Saskia needs to understand that his role is to just step back and get the wave when it crashes into the mid tower. As a result, I mean, we see Renekton pull off basically the god flank, the only way that they have back into this game. And Aphelios just picks up a number of kills off the back of that. And as soon as you're fighting an Aphelios that's up 40 farm and 2 or 3 kills on your Jhin, it's a really hard game to play out, right? They had the advantage up until then, but one mistake against a champion like Aphelios, and it's game. You can't come back from that.
I think the worst thing is that it's not just one mistake. A big mistake like that is what really gave TBA the advantage at that point, because sure, Winthrop kind of had a bit of a lead because of how well they punished TBA, who quite honestly didn't have the greatest of early games. But the fact that, again, the god flanked, as you called it from Dylan, it was pretty much what we wanted from this Renekton, as we weren't really sure about how that pick would actually work out. It was dependent on these flanks. It was dependent on people overstepping just a little bit. Unfortunately for Winthrop, that's exactly what happened. And then when that sort of thing ends up happening, there was really no way they could get back into that game, because Aphelios just outscales at that point. And honestly, even though Goo in the early game had some questionable jungle pathing, a little bit of some over-aggressive plays, I think his Lamb's respite past that mid-game were phenomenal. Every single one of them were fight impacting, to the point where, if not for those, we don't see the subsequent pop-offs from Sean post the play that you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we are going to go to a short be right back. You might see the stream dip for just a second. We want to make sure that for the next game, everything's exactly how we want it to run, so it looks as good as possible for all of you watching out there. So if it dips, don't worry about it. It is planned, and we'll be right back up, and we will be right back up as well prior to the game 2 draft. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you shortly.